Hello, this is Sam Gerrans from samgerrans.com. Today is Monday, April 17th, 2023. And today the subject is top scientists warn, quote, the next pandemic is coming. Now, normally on a Monday, I try to do a long form piece of work, which I split up between here and all my various sort of video platforms and Substack. But today I haven't been able to do it because life happens. So I'll try and get it done later in the week. But I saw this piece, I thought, here we go. So I haven't read it. We're just going to look at the propaganda quotient of it and review it together and see where they're taking us. And this is from our good friends at The Independent. Yes, I do rather pick on The Independent, but you don't have to pay for it. I'm certainly not giving them any of my money to propagandize me. In fact, they should be paying me to read this rubbish. And it's all the same anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. I'm sure you'll find something similar in your favorite, George Soros owned outlet, or whoever it is who owns it, somebody like George Soros. It's all propaganda, and that's what I'm showing you. And not only is it propaganda, it's always been propaganda. This is the big thing. It's not just that they started propagandizing you with the Ukraine war and all of that, and the pandemic and all of that, but they've been doing it for, well, actually 100 years. I mean, where do you think feminism came from? Why do you think most of the women that you meet, certainly if you're at university, all think exactly the same thing, or pretty much the same thing, insofar as, they have that kind of rational thought, or at least hold the same views when you prod them. Let's say they have the same triggers. That's really what I'm talking about. They have it because they've been indoctrinated, and men have been indoctrinated too into a whole set of things that they didn't think 20 or 30 years ago. And since you've been rolling over for all of those other things, well, they expect you to keep on rolling over. Sometimes it doesn't work. And we noticed it quite recently. Something didn't work. I can't remember what it was. They tried to push a story about a boat that the Nord Stream had been blown up by some tourists who decided to take a boat out there and do that, and because they needed a cover story. And that didn't actually work, but another 5 years, that sort of thing will work. So anyway, we're just going to look at this and see where it's going. As I say, I haven't read it, and we can mock it together. Now, top scientists warn the next pandemic is coming and we're not ready for it. Okay, see if I can get rid of some of this advertising. I do apologize for this. There isn't, I think, anything I can do about it. Anyway, they've got some rather horrific pictures there and scary pictures of people with masks. Sir John Bell and Sir David King among leading scientists to argue UK is no better prepared than it was in 2020 as a new variant in India causes concern. And I touched on that so-called new variant in India, I think, in my last video, which is why I picked up on this and thought I'd have a look at it. So let's see what it says. The UK is not ready for the next global pandemic because public services are being dismantled and key research is being defunded, experts have claimed. Now, experts, you'll start to hate this word after a while. I certainly do. It's sort of like an angel, isn't it? An angel has come down and declared from on high whatever the word is from the Almighty. But experts, I mean, who are they? What are their qualifications? And more importantly, who's paying them? Let's find out if we can ascertain at least some of that information as we go through this. But the key thing is here, you should be very afraid. Whatever happened before, it's going to be worse this time. We're not ready for it. Something has to happen. You see, this is how advertising works. You create a problem, and then you create a solution, and then everybody's happy. You may be sure that the solution is going to be you bending over for more tyranny. That's going to be the solution. More than 3 years ago, after the global outbreak of coronavirus, top scientists, not just scientists. It's a bit like when a government is accused of something, recently it was Prince Andrew, who he was accused of something. Well, we know what Prince Andrew's been accused of. But he not only denied it, but he vigorously denied it. Now, there's a difference between denying and vigorously denying. I mean, it's just like the more you shake as you're doing it, makes it more true somehow. These are not just scientists, they're top scientists. Again, I wonder who they are, what their names are, and if we're ever going to find out who's actually paying them. Have warned that the UK is no better prepared for a pandemic than it was in 2020. i.e. you're going to be locked up in your house again. You won't be able to go out for a walk. So get ready, roll up your shirt sleeves because they've got something new. This one might knock you out and cause you to have a heart attack at the age of 28, like quite a lot of the people who took the last one. But, that's just as a conspiracy theorist might say. They say we've had experts and we've had top scientists. We still don't have a name. They say another epidemic on the scale of COVID-19 is inevitable, but that the I've got to close this. The disinvestment in infection monitoring services, dismantling of key infrastructure, and the state of the NHS means the country is, quote, losing ground, end quote. So there's your problem. What you need is more of the infrastructure that was in place last time so that you can continue obeying. But there's a problem. Let's see if we can solve it, or if they're going to solve it. Let's have a look. The warning comes as virologists told The Independent that the new COVID-19 variant behind a surge, they like this word, surge. I think surge occurred in the last article I read on this subject. I think they probably just have I wonder if they're just writing these articles using AI now. If you've ever used AI, it's very interesting. You can just write any old nonsense in all kinds of styles. I wonder if they're doing that. Looks like perhaps these are just bots. That would explain a lot, wouldn't it? Write a propaganda piece to terrify the British public, to make them feel that that there's an inevitable new outbreak coming. There's nothing they can do about it, but they should be very afraid. Enter. The variant first, hold on, have we done this? Oh yes, going back a bit. Behind a surge, I got stuck on surge, of 10,000 new COVID cases a day in India may turn more aggressive. It's like toxic masculinity, isn't it? It's an aggressive, this type of COVID, it's not going to be some kind of passive beta male kind of flu. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to get right up in your face and start shouting at you, this one. Could become the dominant strain in the UK. The variant, first identified in January and known as Arcturus. They love creating these names. They're just laughing at you. They as if you haven't worked it out, the people who own all of these journals which promote, which basically feed into your mind what it is you think the world is, most of which is actually either erroneous or complete lies. They despise you. They completely despise you, and you can't really blame them. I mean, if you were a member of the ruling elite and you woke up every morning and you knew that you were just part of 0.00001% of the world population, and you had 99% of the world's population thinking that they were making up their own minds, when you knew for a fact that you were creating the thoughts which were in their brains. I mean, why wouldn't you despise people? I mean, it'd be inevitable, really, when you think about it. Found in 22 countries, including the UK and the US, has prompted India to resume its production of vaccines. Well, that would be the solution, won't it? You paying for more things to go into your arm and into your DNA and into that of your children. And if you read things, for example, Agenda 30 and what they're planning to do, how would you do it? How would you, if you were a member of this elite and you had, as a conspiracy theorist might say, certainly there are documents out there which claim that they want to get rid of a lot of us. How would you go about it and make money at the same time? I can't think of a better way of doing it than this. So far, just to note, we haven't had a person, but I think we're actually going to have a person now, a person with a name. Sitting Ducks. Sir John Bell, a leading immunologist and member of the UK's COVID vaccine task force. I've left the UK now. I can't live there anymore. It's too insane for me. But I do remember the last time I was there, it was about 5, 6, 7 years ago. They've started, everything's awful. It's now dumbing down and it's degrading. The post office doesn't work and nothing actually works. And they've become actually more like they used to be in Russia, where people would say, oh yeah, they'll come, but they don't come. And then they just throw something over the wall. Somebody told me recently, they sent, they ordered a book, and I sent them the book. And it's supposed to be going through, I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but a very well-known, sort of shipping company. And the guy just, you're supposed to get a signature for this. This guy just threw it over the wall. That's all he did, and left it in the yard. That was him doing his job, and everything's becoming degraded. But they've changed the name, so everything's called like a task force response team. And I don't know if it's got any better since I was there, but dealing with the police, for example, that was really interesting. We had one kind of we approached the police because of a not particularly serious event which had happened, which I wanted to report to them. And I realised that they're basically in marketing. They came to the house and they were very interested in how we felt about things. They weren't interested in doing anything about it, but they were trying. I could see what they were doing. They were trying to finesse me. I said, I don't need any finessing. Are you going to do anything about this? If you're not going to do anything about it, just tell me and you can go away. But if you are going to do something about it, then please do it and let me know. That's all. But don't sit here and, try to kind of finesse me, because I'm not interested. I used to work in public relations. I know what this looks like. It's not very interesting. So anyway, nobody actually does anything anymore. The police don't really do the police. The teachers don't really teach. The post office doesn't really deliver anything. I mean, anyway, but what they really do is what they've got lots of, and you can relate this to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. As far as the West goes, is they've got plenty of lies. They never seem to run out of them. They just get better and better and better at telling them. On another quick aside, I don't know why this comes in my mind, but if you deal with like customer service at all, it's nonsensical what they do. You go through this cycle of where you try to explain something so you can get some response, and you get back these boilerplate responses about how much feelings they have and how they sympathize, but no actual action. Do what I do. Well, you can consider doing what I do. What I do when I write to these people is I say, this is the issue. I do not want any sympathy, understanding, or finessing. I actually want some action. And I would like your response to deal only with the actions that you're going to take in, because this will save us both a lot of time. They can't do it. You can feel them getting really, really frustrated. I just did it to wind them up, really. Anyway, where were we? Oh, yes, Sir John Bell. Well, he's a Sir, and his name's John, and his surname is Bell. I mean, how could that not be somebody you could rely upon? Sir John Bell, a leading immunologist. So he's leading. So we've had experts, we've had top scientists, and now he's not just an immunologist. He's a leading immunologist. Not, again, going back to Prince Andrew, he doesn't just deny it, he rigorously denies it. And a member of the UK's COVID vaccine task force during the pandemic said it was too easy to dismiss COVID-19 as a, quote, once-in-a-generation crisis. Well, I don't think anybody with a functioning brain is dismissing COVID as a once-in-a-generation crisis. I think anybody whose mind is still operative knows that this was a beta test and we're just waiting out for the actual rollout. Anyway, writing in The Independent, he warned that it is, quote, a question of when, not if, another pandemic strikes. Yeah, well, potentially he would know, wouldn't he? I mean, I don't wish to impugn this particular man, this gentleman, and his, professional qualifications and so on. Leaving him to one side, we certainly do know that people like Bill Gates and so on were, they were modeling this, they were testing this, they were doing, sort of desktop models of what this would look like just a month or two before it actually happens. I mean, the kind of luck these people have, you couldn't make it up. Anyway, well, let's go back to what the leading immunologist has got to say. Adding that the nation needs to adopt an always-on approach, i.e., never can you go back to your former life. And that's what it's about. If you think back to 9/11, which was another, well, if you haven't looked into 9/11, I'm not going to go over it here. But I do know for a fact that 3 buildings collapsed in New York and only 2 of them were hit by planes. That's an unassailable fact, okay? So, you might want to think about that for a while. What I do know is that since that event happened, we've been in an always-on state as concerns not having any freedoms. So that's what I said this on day one when it came to COVID. It's just, this was the next shoe to drop. So it's never going away. And they're just telling you, this is what this is really about. It's really about telling you, it's an expert, a leading expert, who's a member of a task force team. How could you possibly? And he's a Sir, and he's got a surname that rings. Yeah, what could you not? Why would you not be able to trust this person? He's telling you it's never going away, and I know better than you do. So get used to it, plebs. All right, carry on. That includes building a more resilient healthcare system. Resilient. Well, that's the kind of word that a Sir would use, isn't it? Carrying out better surveillance. Oh, there we are. And identifying future threats. Okay, so they're going to be watching you and what's going on all the time, and you have no say in this whatsoever. And they're going to be modelling what's going to happen. In fact, probably planning what's going to be happening in the future. So get used to it. There you are. I'm not here to inveigh against this. for me, if you just, if you don't know me, you don't know my broader work. And I know I'm sort of waxing a bit lyrical today. I'm just in the, I've had quite a morning, so I'm in this kind of mood. There's no stopping this. Okay, it's never ever going to go away, and the world is not going to wake up. There's not going to be any sort of multipolar solution to any of this. They're out to drive through the next stage of the agenda, and your opinion has nothing to do with any of it. And my opinion is get used to that fact and make peace with your maker. That would be my actual advice. Okay, so I know I'm waxing a bit lyrical and a little bit humorous on this, but this isn't going away. It really isn't. They never stop. They can't stop. They cannot stop. And identifying future threats. To continue, despite everything we have learned, we are not ready for the next pandemic, he wrote. Yes, there's going to be one. He's very sure. I'm sure he knows. Perhaps he even knows when it's going to come. And we're not ready for it. I wonder what the solution is. I can kind of guess it's going to be something to do with you doing what you're told. He wrote, the next pandemic could be even more devastating than the last. I mean, just economically, that's the end of Europe. I mean, if it weren't enough with that part of the agenda, and now what we're going through with the special military operation, this was a war against Europe from day one. It was, in fact, I said it was on day one. Going back, the next pandemic could be even more devastating than the last. We need to be in a constant state of total fear. We need to be shaking in our basements, and we need to suspect oh no, I made that little bit up. Let's go back. We must be in a constant state of readiness for the next big health crisis. If we do not act now, we will not be forgiven. It's a moral payload here. This is a religion. Okay, this is a sort of apocalyptic. It's a pharmaceutical apocalyptic vision that you have to get on board with. You're going to die one day. I mean, you have a certain amount of days to live. You can either spend them on your feet or on your knees. I know which way I'm going to go. Any more of this tosh? Yes. He referred to modelling. Modelling, that's a computer program. You do know that you can program a computer to say exactly what you want. If you haven't, well, unless of course you're using Microsoft Word, that suggests that there's a 38% chance that another pandemic will happen within our lifetime. Well, there you are. Whose lifetime? We're all in different lives. Some people are 5, some people are 96. It's a completely ludicrous statistic. But 38, not 40, but 38 sounds much more exact, doesn't it? I mean, somebody who's a sir and a bell and uses word like resilient, he's going to come up with an exact number. Well, here's an exact number. Are you impressed? I hope so. That another pandemic will happen within our lifetime, which would have the, quote, the potential to cause even greater destruction. Okay? Again, we're still in the threat stage of this. I'm wondering where the payload's going to come. I mean, the threat is the payload. I mean, the medium is the message to a certain extent. But let's see where this goes. How much of it's left? I'm not sure. A little bit. Professor Theresa Lamb, well, you have to have a woman in there because otherwise it's just not sort of equality-driven, team-based focus grouped enough. One of the principal investigators leading the Oxford AstraZeneca program said the UK had failed to take on board many, quote, hard-learned lessons from COVID. Yeah, I'll tell you what my hard-learned lesson from COVID was. If I see anybody with a syringe, and I'm talking about sticking it in my arm, I either run away or punch them in the face. That's my what I've learned. She warned that the public will be, quote, sitting ducks in a new pandemic if there are no further efforts by the government to invest in preparation. That sounds absolutely, that's the frightening bit from this. For me, it's the government investing in, what do they call it? Further efforts by the government to invest in preparation. You know what that means, don't you? She highlighted the government's decision to, quote, disband tracking systems. They want it all back. You thought it was going away. You thought you were going to be able to take your dog out and actually go to the Lake District and have a holiday. No. This is never going away. I said it last time. It's never, ever going away. And not only is it going away, they're going to add war and economic collapse and social unrest. Just look at what's happening in France. Okay? There's an experiment they did. I read quite a lot of strange books, and I read a whole book about torture. It wasn't exactly, not easy reading, but there was a bit in it about what happens some sick individuals tortured dogs, or they called it stressing, but not any normal person would call it torturing. What they discovered was, and I suppose this is a kind of development from the Pavlov experiments, is that if you stress a dog, if you stress them with one thing, like let's say for example loud noise, like sirens going off like every 20 seconds or something, it'll dislike it, but it'll adapt to that bit. If you then starve it, okay, it's now got two things that it doesn't like, and it'll just about manage to cope with it. But if you add a third, if you add one more thing, like for example electric shocks, or some, I don't know, I don't have that kind of imagination, but I'm just I just read a bit, it'll give up. That point it just gives up. Now they don't care about at what point an Alsatian gives up, psychologically. They're testing it because they want to know about you and me. So where were we? Yes, assign the country. I've lost myself here. Preparation. Yes, she highlighted the government's decision to, quote, disband tracking systems. Yeah, they want all of that back. And here we are, we've got an expert, and not only an expert, but an expert who follows somebody who's a sir. And now this one is a woman, so she's probably more compassionate. She's, you can't attack her for being a part of the patriarchy. And women are supposed to be, until people like, Ursula von der Leyen and what's that idiot called? Oh, crikey. Liz Truss, until people like that came along, we were sort of labouring under the illusion that women were more compassionate than men. That's all, for me, that's all gone out of the window. It's one of the upsides of the last 20 years for me anyway. Anyway, let's see what this genius has got to say. She highlighted the government's decision to, quote, disband tracking systems, including its gold standard COVID survey. I love these words. Gold standard. Doesn't it sound like it really must work? No, it's a tyranny. Can you imagine? You're being dragged into the gas chamber. You've got a gold standard corner, a gold standard shower at Auschwitz. This is what they're doing. If you haven't seen it, watch Brazil by Terry Gilliam. Came out in the mid-80s. Absolutely prophetic film, in my view. The last remaining system used to monitor infections. They're not monitoring infections, they're monitoring you. A sign that the country would not be fully prepared for another pandemic. Writing in the Independent, i.e. in another, is it in this one? I can't remember, they're all the same. Yeah, this is Independent. So, writing in this same government-sponsored, real government, deep states-owned outlet, this person said, quote, such surveillance systems, as she described such surveillance systems as, quote-unquote, crucial. Crucial that you be surveilled, as the Americans say. Surveilled, yes, that means no privacy, that means no rights. That's what this means. And they're using compassion. I talked about this on my walks when I travelled across America. The weaponization of compassion. And they did it to justify wars, they do it to justify absolutely everything. They care so much that they just got to kill you. It's amazing, isn't it? As crucial for identifying new variants, tracking case numbers, and helping the UK to tackle any virus spread. I'll just translate this into humanese, okay? What they want to do is absolutely eradicate your ability to go to the shops when you feel like it, or to see your aged mother, or to go out of the house, or to earn a living. And they're going to use this weaponized language of compassion or kind of concern for your health in order to destroy you, as if you hadn't had enough. I'm only saying this to let you know that they're never going away. It's never going to stop. Forget about it. She said, we have learnt time and again that we need to track this virus carefully to distinguish if the current vaccination recommendations are enough, i.e. whether we're going to force you to take another injection, which you're not allowed to sue the manufacturers of, when we decide this is going to happen. She added, without more of a concerted effort to work together. I don't quite understand how that works. A concerted effort means working together. But anyway, who cares about English anymore? And invest in pandemic preparedness. We are sitting ducks for the next virus. I'll just translate this. What this means is until government gets out and starts forcing people to do what it wants them to do, then we're not going to be happy. We're basically calling for more tyranny. But we're dressing it up in a white coat and a stethoscope so you think that you can't criticize it. But I am criticizing it. Nothing has changed. Some experts also pointed to the issue of COVID testing labs being mothballed and plans to sell off the UK's future vaccine manufacturing and research laboratory, the UK Vaccine Manufacturing and Innovation Centre. Innovation. This terminology is such tosh. Innovation Centre, before it had even opened. So what they're saying is we've got the infrastructure in place. What we want is we don't want to be lax in this or let it slip. What we want to do is pump a load of money into it and make sure we've really got it there. What they want to do is to give a shot in the arm, excuse the expression, to this system so that it's nicely maxed up and kind of psycho by the time they're ready to roll out the next iteration, which they will be quite soon, I should imagine. In addition, after a year of record A&E waits, there's quite a lot of reasons for that. Your countries are filling up with people who haven't invested in any of the system and are just being basic. I mean, as far as I can see, the Royal Navy's only job seems to be to, rescue people and make sure they make it safely to shore. People who don't have visas, don't have passports, have no actual business in the country and have never invested in it. That'll be a reason. Another reason will be you're at war with Russia and you've just had your cheap gas supply cut off, at least if you live in Germany. Printing money, that'd be another. I mean, there are lots of reasons why this is happening, and of course, the last, COVID thing was part of that. So, because they're destroying all the small businesses. This is a plan. This is a business plan. It's the only thing that makes sense. If you look at what's happening, not only in the last 4 or 5 years, but in the last 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 80 years, it only makes sense when you realise that there is a plan, and all they do is call when you are able to see that A leads to B leads to D, they say that you're a conspiracy theorist, and that's the end of the conversation, isn't it? So anyway, let's just see where this ends up. Our concern is that the NHS is now in a worse position to tackle a pandemic than it was when COVID struck 3 years ago. Well, perhaps we'd just chop people's heads off, be cheaper, wouldn't it? Sir David King, he's another Sir, and he's David. It's like King David. And a king, we've got a bell and we've got a king. It sounds like part of the Apocrypha, doesn't it? I mean, these names, I don't know if they're made up. He's a former chief scientific advisor to the government. Okay, that means, I'll just translate that for you. He's somebody the government pays to give it the kind of advice it wants to hear. Because if he didn't want to hear that advice, they'd stop paying him. That's how it works. Who led the 2006 research that closely predicted the COVID pandemic, said the world is likely. It's not definitely going to, but it's likely. This is the kind of language that economics analysts use. Likely to see another virus outbreak on the same scale in the next 15 years. He told The Independent, "We're in the same position as we were in 2020. Nothing has changed. If anything, it's got worse." See, basically, be afraid. We need a tyranny superstate in place so we can track everybody and make sure they do exactly what we want. And we can't even relax now that this is over and can't enjoy anything. And you're going to have to pay for it. Okay. Sir David said the government had failed to invest in the NHS and it was no doubt that it was in a worse position, blah, blah. The former government advisor added that by failing to fund the health service to bolster Britain's ability to respond to another pandemic, the government is, quote, discounting the future. And discounting the future, what does this mean? It's one of the kind of, if you've worked in business, you find that sort of blathering terms come in and out of fashion. Discounting the future. It sounds like it really is an important thing. It sounds like it's very well considered. If you've been at meetings, you play bingo like this. I mean, I've worked in a number of industries, and you sit at these interminable meetings, and there's nothing to listen to because you know what people are going to say before you get there. And anyway, if you're British, there's no point being at a meeting because it's been decided before. Meetings are just they're basically like a verbal floral dance that you go through. So people are supposed to be brought on board. Well, we all know there's a decision that's been made, and there's no point really talking about it. And so people just sit there playing kind of like bingo with certain types of terms that that industry uses. Just as an aside, Russian meetings are very different. I mean, there can be conversation, there can be discussion, but it's more real. If the decision has been made, you get to the meeting and they say, you do this, you do that. You don't have to go through this pretense, because everybody, if it's been made, then there's nothing to talk about. But I don't know if it's the same in America. Maybe it is. I don't know. I've never worked there. But in Britain, you have this pretense at, I don't know, like getting people's input. I can't really switch into that kind of language on the fly here. But we want to invest in people, so we're here to to elicit input and blah 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 blah. But everybody in the room knows that that's the last thing that they want. What they want to do is to pretend to listen to you, so then you can pretend to believe that you have some choice in it, and then we get on with what the actual plan is. Just like democracy, see? Anyway, let's wrap this up. Is there much more of this? I hope not, because it's so dull. I don't know if I can bother with any more of it. Let's just kind of skim through, see if we can find anything interesting. Yes, fear and death. We will have many, many cases. It'll get really out of hand, and then we'll have hospitals completely overwhelmed. Okay, so fear and stuff. So now we're losing ground. Some kind of war they're fighting. There were some good strategic moves, blah, blah. Let's get to the actual cut to the chase. This is so... Who's speaking here? Professor Peter Horby. Okay. I'm going to link to it down below. If you want the rest of it, if you want it, you can have it. But I think you get the point of it. It's just too long and tedious. But anyway, he ends up by saying, the UK Health Security Agency was set up to combat future health threats, and it continues to monitor the threat posed by COVID through surveillance systems and genomic capabilities. Well, do you know what a genomic capability is? I don't think anybody really does. I don't suppose he really does. But what I do know is it's going to mean you won't be able to go out, you won't be able to earn a living, and you're going to have to pay lip service to some more complete errant nonsense. I'll take my chances with me personally, I'll take my chances with it. I certainly got a lot more sympathy for an actual virus than I have for anything the government's going to come up with. But I mean, we're getting into the subject of where these things came from, and we can only speculate. Through the surveillance systems, genomic capabilities, while maintaining our laboratory infrastructure and the stock of lateral flow tests, will ensure testing will be scaled up swiftly if a COVID wave results in significantly increased pressure on the NHS. I'm just going to stop here. This is blather, okay? He's just drowning you in mumbo jumbo and making you feel as if it's really very serious, but you've got a very serious person at the top of it. So serious, the serious issue has been taken care of by he's a professor. He's called Peter. I mean, good grief. That's not enough to instill confidence in the British public. I don't know what is. What I'm trying to show you is they're keeping you frightened. They're keeping you understanding that this is coming back. You're making a mental note of that. Excuse me. And they're keeping their options open. And so they're keeping this on the front burner so that you recognize it when it starts coming back. It's a brand, and the brand is COVID or some kind of disease. They'll come up with a new name of it. And the selling proposition is actuated by fear. And fear is often, not always, but often basically rooted in ignorance, and they keep you ignorant of it. And also the fact that it's also big and nebulous. And their propaganda is amazing. It really is. It never ends. They're never going to go away. If I were you, I'd make peace with God and, trust in him. That's me. Anyway, that's the end of that one. I currently upload to Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube and Substack, so please like, share and subscribe on all platforms. It's free to do, but a valuable way of giving back. Go to samgerrans.com and drop your email in the box to subscribe to my Substack newsletter and get all new content delivered to your inbox. I back up my mailing list so that when big tech cancels me, we still have options. I work outside the mainstream and have no corporate sponsorship. If you value what I do, you can help keep the lights on at samgerrans.com/contribute, or upgrade to a paid subscription on my Substack to access my more detailed work as well as comment. Substack being where I read and often respond to all feedback. I continue to make my legacy projects available free. Summaries and links are at samgerrans.com/books. Finally, I post news, thoughts and announcements to my Telegram channel at t.me/samgerrans. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.